They asked me to choose between my baby and my own life, then slid me a form I was too weak to read. When paper becomes heavier than fate. Hospitals are supposed to feel like places of safety, but on the night my world split open, the room felt more like a courtroom. The beeping machines weren't comforting. They were counting something down. I was 29, pregnant with my first child, staring at ceiling tiles that blurred into gray rivers. Nurses whispered, doctors spoke in clipped tones, and my husband, Daniel, stood frozen near the door as if afraid to step closer. Someone said words like risk and time window. Someone else said I needed to make a decision. Then a clipboard slid across the bed, landing against my trembling hand. I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small could hold so much weight. I couldn't even read the top line. My vision tunneled, my throat closed, and I realized the room wasn't asking for my permission. It was asking for my life. The diagnosis that changed everything. The pregnancy had been perfect, until it was. I'd felt dizzy that afternoon, but blamed it on nerves. By evening, I was gripping the kitchen counter while Daniel rushed me to the hospital. The word the doctor finally used was one I'd only heard in medical dramas. Suddenly, my body had become a problem to solve. They explained that things had turned unpredictable. There were options, but none without consequences. I asked if my baby would be okay, and the doctor hesitated for half a breath too long. That pause told me more than his careful sentences ever could. Daniel squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers tingled. I could feel his fear pulsing into me, like we were sharing one heart between us. I tried to stay calm, but the room smelled like antiseptic and dread, and every sound echoed like a warning bell. Image prompt. Doctor speaking gently beside hospital bed, woman pale and exhausted. Husband holding her hand tightly, medical monitors around, sterile hospital atmosphere, emotional realism, same characters. The form I couldn't see. The nurse was kind, I remember that. She tucked my blanket closer before handing me the clipboard. "Just your consent," she said softly, as if that phrase were harmless. My eyes traced the shape of the paper but couldn't focus on the words. They danced like insects. I asked Daniel to read it, but his lips moved without sound. He'd gone white, like he might crumble before I did. The doctor cleared his throat and explained that in rare emergencies, decisions had to be documented. I nodded, pretending I understood, pretending I had strength left. My hands shook so badly the pen slipped twice. I had signed legal documents before, leases, job offers, boring adult things, but this one felt like a contract with the unknown. I didn't know exactly what I was agreeing to. I only knew I was too tired to fight it. The silent question. No one actually said the words out loud, but the room was full of them anyway. Every look carried the same silent question. What are you willing to give up? I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that I hadn't even held my baby yet, that I still had unopened gifts at home, folded baby clothes in drawers, names scribbled on sticky notes on the fridge. Instead, I whispered, "Can you both be saved?" The doctor didn't answer right away. That pause, again, felt like falling down a staircase in slow motion. Daniel leaned close, his forehead touching mine. His eyes were red, his voice barely there. "I don't want to lose you." I realized then that this wasn't just my decision. It was tearing through every person who loved me. When time stops feeling real. I don't remember how long I lay there waiting. Minutes stretched like hours. I stared at the ceiling, counting cracks in the paint like they were lifelines. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled. Somewhere else, someone laughed, a sound so out of place it felt cruel. I thought about my mother teaching me how to braid hair, about the way Daniel proposed with a ring he couldn't afford, about the tiny kicks I'd felt at night when I couldn't sleep. I tried to imagine my baby's face, but my mind refused to go there, like it was protecting me from something too sharp to hold. The nurse came back, checking machines, whispering updates I didn't understand. I realized then that the hospital wasn't waiting for my clarity. It was waiting for my body to give in or fight back. Signing in the dark. They brought the clipboard back. I don't know if I'd asked for it or if they decided it was time. The page looked heavier than before, like gravity had chosen it as a target. Daniel helped guide my hand because I couldn't keep it steady. I signed my name the way a child writes their first letters, crooked, uncertain, not quite mine anymore. The nurse dabbed at my forehead with a cool cloth, whispering that everything possible would be done. When they wheeled me toward the double doors, Daniel tried to smile. It was the bravest, most broken expression I'd ever seen. I wanted to memorize it in case it was the last thing I saw. As the doors swung shut, I wondered how something as ordinary as a pen could change the entire shape of a life. The place between here and elsewhere. There's a space in the middle of everything where you don't feel alive or gone. That's where I drifted. Sounds became muffled, like I was underwater. I remember a bright light above me and someone telling me to stay still. In that fog, I dreamed I was holding a tiny hand. It fit perfectly into my palm, like it had always belonged there. I tried to speak, but no words came out, only a feeling, an overwhelming pull toward something I hadn't even met yet. Then there was nothing at all. Not darkness, not peace, just absence like when a song stops mid-note. Waking up to a different world. When I opened my eyes, the room was quiet in a way that felt wrong. No rush of voices, no urgent footsteps, just the slow hum of machines and the weight of exhaustion in my bones. Daniel was asleep in a chair, his head resting against the bed. His face looked older, carved by something heavy. When he felt me move, he startled awake like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "You're here," he whispered, as if afraid I'd vanish again. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My first instinct wasn't to ask about myself. It was to ask about the baby, but the word wouldn't come. Fear sat on my chest like a stone. Daniel took my hand and squeezed it gently, and in that moment I understood that whatever had happened, we were about to learn how to live with it. The news that changed our meaning of hope. The doctor returned with eyes that held both relief and gravity. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if every word were made of glass. I watched his mouth more than I listened, bracing for something I wasn't sure I could survive hearing. Then Daniel started crying. Not loud sobs, just silent tears that fell onto our joined hands. The doctor said our baby had arrived too soon, that there would be challenges, that nothing was guaranteed. But the word alive echoed louder than anything else. I didn't feel joy right away. I felt something closer to disbelief, like the world had bent in a direction I hadn't known was possible. Somewhere beyond the walls, a tiny heartbeat was fighting its own quiet battle. For the first time since the clipboard, I allowed myself to breathe all the way in. The aftermath no one warns you about. Recovery wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, invisible. I replayed that night over and over, wondering what exactly I had agreed to. The form became a ghost, something I couldn't see clearly but felt everywhere. Daniel tried to be strong, but sometimes I caught him staring into nothing, like he was still standing in that hallway. We didn't talk about the decision at first. It was easier to focus on visiting the nursery unit, on counting breaths, on learning new words we never expected to learn. Friends called us brave. They said everything happened for a reason. I nodded, but inside I was still standing in that room, pen hovering over paper, too tired to understand the shape of my own choice. Redefining strength. Months later, I finally asked to see the form. A nurse retrieved it from my file carefully, like it might break if handled too roughly. I read every word this time. It didn't explain my fear. It didn't capture the weight of that night. It was just ink on paper. But I realized something as I folded it back into the folder. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't always look like bold decisions or clear answers. Sometimes it looks like shaking hands and borrowed courage. Sometimes it's trusting other people when your own body has nothing left to give. Our child is growing now, small but stubborn, like both of us. Every time I hold that tiny hand, I think about the woman I was that night, lost, terrified, still trying to love harder than she had ever loved before. The moral beyond the clipboard. I used to think life-changing choices were dramatic, clear moments where you rise up and conquer fear. Now I know better. Sometimes the bravest thing you do is survive a decision you were never truly ready to make. What I learned is this: paperwork can record consent, but it can't capture humanity. Real courage often happens when clarity is gone and all you have left is love. And morality isn't about perfect choices, it's about compassion in impossible situations. If you're ever standing in a place where answers blur and strength feels borrowed, remember this: you are not weak for needing help, and you are not failing for being afraid. The measure of a life is not in the forms we sign, but in the hearts we keep choosing to protect, even when our hands are trembling.